Good evening. It's Julie Pitra, and it's time for our Pitranomics Thursday talk. And after the day I've had, I'm pretty excited about this one. Tonight, we have Demetra Caston, who is a licensed professional supervisor and naturally certified counselor. She's been a counselor for 6 years and is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy trained. Ugh, all those coming out of my mouth. She has worked with teenagers to overcome many issues, including but not limited to low self-esteem, self-harming behaviors, trauma, essay, and coping with school transitions. She's also worked with families and married couples that have challenges and are seeking practical options, those people going through life transitions, which a lot of us in career changes are doing, grief. She's got everything down. I'm so excited to hear about her tips and her strategies today. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming. Ms. Demetra, can we spotlight both? And I would just love to hear what you'd like to share about what you do, and then we'll get into some questions.
Thank you for having me. Like you said, I'm a licensed professional counselor, supervisor, and I spend most of my time helping clients just work through day-to-day issues, whether it's work-related, stress-related, relationship-related, or school-related.
Okay, that's pretty amazing. I have had a stressful almost 2 weeks because I went away for almost 5 weeks, and that was not stressful. That was great. Mm-hmm. And then I came back and I felt like the fire hose is at me.
Right.
And it's been a struggle to keep calm because, the older I get, I have health issues related to stress. Right. I don't sleep as well. I have high blood pressure. My metabolism isn't what it is. So I am a firm believer that protecting your mental health just helps with everything that you want to do. Right. And like I said, I appreciate that you've spent some time or have some time for us today. One of the things I want to do, I have some questions, and then we'll open it up to be more interactive. Those of you who've attended my Pitranomics Thursday talk know that I love interaction. So please feel free to have your questions, put them in the chat, whatever it takes to make it work. So my first question for you, how do people leave their mental health vulnerable? What are the ways that you see?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think primarily is that we're in a society where we do a lot of things, and our mental and physical and emotional health usually gets put on the back burner. And so we are overworked. We stay up super late at night. We don't exercise. We don't eat right. We just do all the things that we shouldn't do. And, we like to have fun. We like to drink and whatever. And so, but we don't often focus on our mental health while doing so. And so I think, one of the ways that we can change that is by focusing more on the things that we want to do and need to do to help us to be more balanced.
No, that's pretty awesome. Just a quick recap of what Pitranomics is. It's a 10-part strategy to grow, protect, and transfer wealth. Mm-hmm. And the first thing we do in going through the strategy is identify what your goals are, your end-of-life goals. Mm-hmm. And those are those ones so crucial that you're dedicating your life to these goals. Right. And the second part of that first step is to understand what resources you have available. Mm-hmm. And we focus on money, energy, and time. And how strong your mental health not only impacts your energy levels and what you have in order to get those goals accomplished, but it really impacts how well you utilize the other resources as well. Right. So that's one of the reasons I was so pleased to have a mental health professional talk about that. And so here's the question: how can therapy help me in those areas?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think for starters, it gives you an avenue just to vent, right? Because being a professional in any field, it's oftentimes hard to convey to your friends and family or colleagues, hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't sleep well at night. I'm overworked. I'm stretched thin. And so counseling helps you to just have a safe environment where you can share, get tools and even be challenged in areas where you feel like, hey, I've got this under control, and you don't really. So I think it's just a safe environment to
don't really
to share how you feel.
Well, to further that, a lot of people don't feel they have any major issues. They're like, we're fine, everything's going on. Now, people around might say, oh my gosh, you have such major issues. But the person doesn't recognize they have issues.
Right.
How do you, I guess, what's a way for a person to understand, even though I don't feel like I have major issues, there's still a benefit to therapy? How do we get people encouraged in that area?
Sure. I think you would incorporate it the same way that you would like getting an oil change for your car, right? It's, it's necessary, but you may not necessarily feel that it's something that you need to do every 3,000 miles. But after a while, if you don't, your car will let you know that, hey, something's wrong. And our bodies do the same thing, right? So we may not feel as though we need it, but after a while, your body starts to break down. You will start to feel some physical effects of not getting enough sleep, not drinking enough water. And so even if you don't feel like you need therapy, it's okay to just go and have a check-in and tell your therapist, hey, I'm not sure that there's anything that I need to talk about. But as a therapist, as people continue to talk, I start to notice, oh yeah, there it is.
There's that thing.
Yeah.
Well, and this is sort of an out of the blue question, but there's a show called Billions. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not. I haven't seen it.
So there's a bunch of hedge fund managers, and it's a very stressful job. And they have on staff a mental health professional, not just to help them stay balanced, it's more to help them stay productive.
Yeah.
So I feel like in our society, we are really pushed to be productive at a high level. Don't be idle, got to be moving. If you're not advancing, you're, sliding back, blah, blah, blah. What is a way to, even before we get to therapy, realize we can't always live in that high pressure environment? And I know this question is kind of out of the blue, but I was feeling some pressure today, more than normal. And I just kind of had to take a breath and sing badly along to some spiritual and inspirational songs.
Yeah.
As a therapist, what are some ways you can tell people, like how do you stay calm before you can get to the professional help? Keep yourself going so you can get to the professional help.
Well, I would say, think about the things that you enjoy doing or used to enjoy doing if you don't have time to do it now. So some people like to work out, right? And so incorporating that into your schedule, if you haven't, or if you used to and then you stopped, reincorporating working out, making sure that you're trying to eat healthy. Sometimes it's hard to do that as a busy professional every day, but at least if you create small tasks, right? So maybe I don't do it 5 days a week, but maybe I can do it 3 days a week and build up to 7 days. If you have a minute, read a book or listen to a podcast. I tell a lot of my clients, even if it's so much as taking a warm bath in the evening and listen to some relaxing music while having on some aromatherapy in the background, just small things like that to start jumpstart that process.
I love how you've mentioned exercise a couple of times. So I would assume that your belief is exercise impacts not just you physically, but mentally.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if you're in a high stress job, or, just a high stress environment. Or if you travel a lot and you're like, well, I have equipment at home, but when I'm traveling, I may not necessarily have access to it. Just walk around the block. Sometimes being out in nature is also therapeutic as well.
Okay. And one of my last questions before I'd like to open it up and maybe get some things. What do you wish everyone understood about mental health professionals and about mental health and the professionals who serve in helping people preserve their mental health?
Well, I'd say that mental health is just as important as everything else. It's physical health, spiritual health. It's just as important, and it's something that should be taken as serious as everything else, right? And I also believe that not every therapist is the same. So it is important, same way we would interview for a job. I think it's also important to know that you should interview your therapist, right? So it's, I think there's a power differential there. And so we feel like, okay, this is a medical professional, so we can't ask these questions, or we can't demand certain things, but you can and you should. And if it's not a good fit, please don't stay with that person just because you're afraid to say, I don't like this or I don't like that. Have the conversation and say, hey, you know what, this is not a good fit for me. So can you give me some referrals, or, you know, I'm going to choose to discontinue services because I don't feel like it's a good fit for me. And I think that helps, just to empower yourself to do the research.
Do the research. I love that. You know, I have been seeing a therapist, I want to say at least 8 years now, at least once a month, because there are things that are difficult to discuss first with your spouse, and, you know, how you deal with your children and how you deal with your friends. I find the time to be where I hash things up and find the tools to deal with any potential obstacles. But it took years for me to be free to just say, yeah, I'm seeing a therapist, you know, I'm seeing a therapist. This is not, it's not anything bad that I'm seeing a therapist. This is just my taking care of myself. It's like my going to my doctor, like
That's right.
every year you should see your doctor. And if you see a problem, you should go see a specialist. And if you find yourself not feeling physically fit, you should go maybe get a trainer or get a coach or something like that. So one of the strategies that in Pitranomics is get professional help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, especially in an area where you don't have strengths. And even though I have believed that most of my life, there are still certain things that I have found difficult to admit, you know, to say that I am overwhelmed and not sure I'm going to get through something, or how I'll get through it, but I won't get through it the way I want to. I won't be as successful in this endeavor. And, you know, I'm very success driven. And so when I feel like something is going to not go the way that I had wanted to go, it really freaks me out. I don't know if anybody else listening also feels that stress, but for me, it's like, it's not going well. It's not going well. And it might not even be something important. I still want it to go the way I envisioned. And I guess high driving personalities really need to step back and check in. But how often do they? How often do the hard driving personalities step back and say, I need a little help. I'm feeling a little stressed. I'm feeling overwhelmed. So thank you for Shamir for saying you can definitely relate. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask right now? Because I have a bunch, but I'd like to take the time to step in and allow someone else to ask some questions.
I have a question real quick. How do you know when it's a good fit with a therapist?
Thank you for asking that. That's a
Very good question.
You know, I think part of it is the feeling that you get, right? Is the similar to your doctor? Do you get a warm feeling from them? Do you feel like they're engaging? Are they connected with you? Are they asking you questions? Are they allowing you to ask questions? And are they not feeling challenged if you have some questions that, you know, they may feel like, oh, this is challenging me as a professional. But I think a person that allows you to ask those questions and don't feel challenged, I think that's a good start.
Okay.
What about the different methods of counseling?
Sure.
Because you're cognitive based
Behavioral therapy?
versus the other methods.
Sure.
Would you speak on that?
Sure. So there are some methods that will focus on, you know, maybe your childhood and how that impacts your future. There are some methods that focus on what's currently going on presently. There are some methods that focus on your whole family system. So how, you know, you were raised in your family impacts how you operate now. I even like to incorporate birth order. So depending on whether you were a firstborn child or middleborn child or last child, that can impact
An only child.
Yeah, exactly. Only child. That can impact how you see life. And so you can discuss with your therapist, you know, what method they like to use, and then if there's something that you prefer or something, or if you say, you know what, I prefer to just stay focused primarily on what's currently happening, then if that therapist is specialized in that, then that would be a way to move forward with them. But if they don't, I think that would be something to discuss, because you know, there's certain methodologies that I don't know and have not trained. And so I would not, ethically, I shouldn't be practicing in that method. And so if you say, hey, I prefer one way over another, and I don't have any knowledge in that, then I should be referring you to somebody who does.
Okay, speaking of the methods, what is cognitive behavioral therapy?
So essentially,
Did I say it right? Cognitive behavioral.
It's essentially a style where it focuses on your thought process, right? So how you think about a particular situation affects how you feel about it, and how you feel about it affects how you respond to it behaviorally. And so if we can change your thought process, then we can change how you respond to certain things.
Okay. My view has been whatever trauma someone has suffered, if they're talking about it, they've survived it. If they've survived it, they've gained some strength from it, and use the strength as a gift to make sure that the trauma wasn't in vain, so to speak. And I still believe that, but it has recently come to my attention that there are certain experiences that I've had in life that I'm not really doing that with, that I think I'm doing it with. I'm like, okay, I've survived it. I'm taking advantage of the strength, but I'm actually being held back from what I want to accomplish because I haven't really dealt with it. And these are old things. These are things that I figure, man, I should have put that to bed 40 years ago, but I haven't. So is there a time limit on how long people could go back and address issues? Like maybe you stop at 5, or you go back to however deep that is and try to bring it up.
Sure. I like to go all the way back because I do think that untreated trauma will continue to affect you in the future, right? And so I think it's important, and you don't have to spend a long time on it, but I think it's important to make the connection between, okay, maybe at the age of 2, I felt a lot of abandonment because one parent or the other wasn't there. And so now at 32 or 42, I struggle with friendships leaving. I struggle with, lost business opportunities. And it takes you right back to that age of 2 when you felt abandoned first. And so if we can tackle that first trauma, then we can move, or I like to tell my clients, we can grow you up, right? So you're still operating sometimes out of this little person inside. And so we can grow you up to the adult so that you don't respond the way that you did as a little kid.
No, I love that. I have a memory. So I don't know how to swim, and I'm almost 60. I don't know how to swim. I panic in the water. I don't just get in there like, oh, I don't know how to swim. No, I lose my mind. And the memory of my first time in the ocean, when my father took me on his shoulders, supposed to be the person you trust, just sort of dunked me in this ocean. I was sputtering and all of that. It is still very vivid. And the panic that I felt is even stronger now. So I'm just not comfortable in the water.
Right.
I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe I need to actually bring that up because, I don't really talk about that. I just don't enjoy the water.
Right.
I haven't been grown up from that yet. It's still, I can do a bathtub. I can do a shower. Ocean, I'm not too comfortable with. Lake, no, thank you. And swimming pool, I'll get up to about here, and that's as far as I want to go. I don't want my face or my ears in the water. So
that's right.
That might be something to address. We have a question. I have to put on my glasses to see that. Okay, hold on. Does the system the therapist logs note info about your sessions? Hold on. Does the system the therapist logs notes into connect with LexisNexis? And does that information get shared with your insurance company, which conversely may affect your insurance should something happen to that person?
Gotcha. Okay. No, it does. It should not, right? So there are quite a few different electronic health record systems. Some therapists will still use hand notes and type notes and things like that and put it in a paper file, right? Most therapists now are moving away from that and are doing electronic health record systems. And so most of them, as far as the few that I am aware of, they do not connect to LexisNexis. They shouldn't. But there's some things going on in the background that we have to keep an eye on as therapists. But no, to answer the first part of the question, no, it should not connect to LexisNexis. As far as your insurance company, the only time that they will request notes is if you are asking for short-term disability or potentially FMLA, something like that, because they have to determine whether or not this is necessary for you to be off work. And so if you're requesting to be off work for an extended period of time, they will want to see copies of your notes. Now, the way that I word my notes, I do not put every single thing that we discuss in the notes. I will kind of give an overview of, we discussed this in general, we talked about past issues, we talked about how do we, what are some tools and tips in order to move forward in this particular issue. But I don't say like, oh, today, we talked about, I hate my husband, or I hate my, we try not to go into detail for that reason.
Okay. I didn't even think about that. How do you know when you're cured, or do you ever need to look at it that way if it's not cured?
Yeah, I would say no. Try not to look at it that way because, life constantly evolves, right? And so we may have a better handle on certain things, but I can't say, I wouldn't necessarily walk through life assuming that we are cured of things, right? Because what we experience in childhood and young adulthood will always affect us in a way, but learning how to manage it, I think, is a better way to just kind of view it. Am I managing it or am I not?
Okay. And is there a way to say to understand or recognize when you're not managing it?
I think when you feel overwhelmed with it. So if you've experienced a trauma, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a trauma, right? But if you're stressed out at work and you're not able to function regularly, so if you're finding yourself, sleeping entirely too much, trying to avoid the situation, or if you're not getting enough sleep, or if you are overeating, or drinking too much, just different things like that. If you notice those things start to pick up, then I would do a self-check and say, okay, where's this coming from, right? Am I doing this because I don't have a lot of time, so I just need to do something really fast? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Am I feeling stressed? So just kind of check in with yourself. And then if you notice it's out of control, then that's when I would maybe seek help.
Okay. That brings me to a question. How do you know when you have a behavior that's, say, out of normal ranges?
Mm-hmm.
For example, I don't smoke or drink. Right? Mm-hmm. And I remember having a conversation with my mother before she passed. I did have a behavior that she didn't support. And she was like, well, you shouldn't do that. And I said, well, I don't smoke or drink. That's just my only vice. This thing over here, I don't smoke or drink or do drugs or spend money or anything like that. And my mom's response to me, well, I'm going to take you downstairs and teach you how to drink. And I think for her and her generation, there were acceptable vices, right, and non-acceptable vices. Mm-hmm. And I think that changes by generation.
Right.
But if it's out of balance, it's out of balance, whether it's an acceptable vice or not. Mm-hmm. Do you think that people struggle more with those vices that are unacceptable or just out of range? Or what's your thought on, I guess, the out of balance-ness that people can feel?
Right. I think that we definitely saw an uptick in all the vices during the pandemic. So, because people didn't know how to cope. And so I think we're trying to come out of that now, and I say come out in terms of doing it in excess, right? So now people are trying to level it out a little bit. But and that's subjective, right? Because some people say, well, if I can handle a pint of some type of liquor, I'm fine, mm-hmm, right? So I don't necessarily feel like I'm the person that can judge what's good and what's bad in that respect, right? If you feel like you can handle it and it doesn't affect your day to day, okay, that's the choice you get to make. But if it starts to take over, or it causes you to have issues at work, or causes you to have issues with family or friends, you start to notice that your support group doesn't want to be around you necessarily, then I would maybe check in and say, hey, what's kind of going on here? Are you noticing some things? And if people are honest with you, they'll tell you, that behavior is kind of troublesome for me. And so maybe you should talk to somebody about that.
I would say that, and this is just my experience, maybe somebody has a different experience, that most people don't come to you and say, that behavior is a little troublesome to me. Maybe you should talk about it with someone. I feel you're doing yourself a disservice or causing you harm. I think people are like, they're grown and I don't need to be involved with what they're doing.
Right.
So that brings me to a question I hadn't even thought of. When are signs to at least say that to someone that you care about? Hey, that behavior is a little concerning to me, and maybe you should talk to someone about it. What are some signs, and what are some ways to say that?
So let's use drinking, for example. So if you have a good girlfriend and you notice that she's drinking, 7 days a week, and she has a whole bottle to herself, whether it's, hard liquor or wine or something like that, and she's drinking the whole thing to herself every day, then I would preface it by saying, hey, obviously you are grown and you get to make this decision, but I'm concerned because this feels excessive, right? And I don't want anything to happen to you. And I'm willing to walk through the process with you. That too is a choice, because you don't necessarily have to, but if you want to, I think kind of lead with that, so that they feel like, oh, you're just telling me what to do or judging me, and you're not willing to do anything to help. So maybe just say, hey, I'm willing to walk through this process with you, but I do see something that is concerning. And so I would just like to know if you want to talk to somebody about that, or even start saying, hey, you could talk to me about it, but if there's more than I can handle, maybe you should talk to a professional.
Talk to a professional. Okay. So that's interesting. I wonder if people normally respond well even to that. No, okay.
Not usually. No. So, but I think, and that's okay, because I think the initial knee-jerk reaction will be, you're judging me, right? And that's to be expected, right? Because nobody really wants to be confronted with stuff, because most people, after a while, you kind of know what you're doing is either too much or excessive, or you're doing it to kind of dull some other pains. You're aware of it, most people. And so it will seem offensive initially, but I think if a person is gentle in bringing that to you, and not, in a public place where, other people can overhear the conversation, or in an environment where you're doing like an intervention where the whole family's there, then I think, allow them to sit with it, and then, say, hey, you know what, if this is too much right now, let's revisit this in a couple of days, but I would like to continue the conversation. But give them the space to feel how they feel, and then, revisit it later if you can.
I don't know how any of you on here feel about dreams, but sometimes I will have these dreams. Certain types they seem to be more important than the others. And that's when they're really, really vivid and just really bizarre. Like when I wake up, I'm like, what's going on? But the clarity is there. I don't understand, but I see what was going on. And quite a few years ago, I can't even remember, at least 10 years ago, I was having this dream about someone, and it was basically, I was being instructed in my dream to tell them something. And when the first time I had it, I was like, I'm not going to tell them that they don't know me like that. Why would I do that? But then it became insistent. And so one day I went to them and I said, this is going to sound really, really weird, but I've had this dream about you, and I was supposed to tell you this. And what I was supposed to say to him was, don't let the monsters out. Contain the monsters. And so I said, does that mean anything to you? And he said, yes, it does. And so, okay, I left it at that. I did not go further. I did not try to find out what the monsters were. What plagues me is within a year, maybe a year and a half after that, he killed himself.
Oh, no.
And I am not a professional. I am not equipped to help anybody,
Mhm.
but maybe the strength would have come to me to at least said, hey, you've got somebody that's listening, that's caring. Maybe you should get some help. To this day, I am still kind of plagued by the fact that I didn't take that further. I'm pretty sure I was supposed to. It bothers me, especially, the way he did it. And it seemed like whatever he was struggling with, that he was coming back and getting to the top of it. And then that's when he took his life in a very violent way. So
Yeah.
I think there's a reason I try now not to be quiet. And I'm sure there's people on here that will say, yeah, you nag, you nag, you nag. But it's not nagging. It's just that I show my love by letting you know I care, and I hope I'm open to it, or I try to be open. I'm not swearing I'm 100%, but I try to be open. Cecily wrote, I absolutely have those types of dreams as well. Also, people have had dreams and messages from me that were actually on point. So she's had the dreams and recognized that they were on point. I think that's awesome. And I think that we feel when someone is struggling,
Right.
but we have to turn off, at least some of us, we turn it off. We're like, that sounds crazy, or they won't accept it, or why would they listen to me, or who am I to them? There's all this stuff. Maybe that's also something to seek therapy about. Why do we think we don't have an impact
Right.
on the people around us?
Mhm.
I don't know. Let's add that to the questions that I would ask. Well, one of the reasons I thought that this topic was really important, because when people are trying to accomplish really life purposeful goals, and I say it's grow, protect, and transfer wealth, but wealth has, not to me, just a financial dimension in its definition. It's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to go off track. It's easy not to ask for help. It's easy to do all these things that don't enable you to use your resources well. And protecting your mental health helps you use your money wisely, because a pathological use of money has some kind of trauma origin, in my opinion. And then not using your time effectively has some kind of pathological origin, in my opinion. Again, no therapist. But I feel like if you use the right tools to get yourself healthy physically, to get yourself healthy mentally, to get yourself healthy spiritually, all the different facets of health help you manifest and accomplish and retain and then transfer wealth. Got to be healthy first.
I agree.
It doesn't mean there aren't people who've amassed major financial fortunes, but are they truly wealthy? Do they have people that care about them? Do they have relationships that sustain them and pour into them? They might have this wealth, but who are they leaving it to? Are they estranged from everyone they've ever known because they've pathologically pursued wealth rather than holistically and healthily pursued wealth? So if there are any other questions, I could keep going, but I want to take this time to open it up for anybody else that has a question. Don't be shy. You can even text me, DM me directly, and I'll ask it on your behalf and be, keep you anonymous if you'd like. But does anybody have anything else they'd like to ask right now?
Do you find that men are less likely or more likely to go to therapy?
Less likely, for sure.
And why is that?
Well,
Let me answer. No.
I'm not talking to Miss Julie right now.
I know. Go ahead.
That's okay. I think men have there's more of a stigma for men. What can this person tell me that I don't already know or can't figure out? I see it the most with couples. Men in couples, they do not want, it's like the women are always dragging them to therapy. And some of the issues that this is valid, is if the woman has already made a connection with the therapist, they'll feel as if, the therapist and the woman will be ganging up on him. And so they don't want to participate, but they also don't want to look for their own therapist, to make it more neutral for them. So I just think it's such a stigma for men. And then I do have quite a few men that, they're embarrassed about crying about something, right? So they don't want to come and be vulnerable, which is fair. I get it. I am a complete stranger. And so I do understand not wanting to be vulnerable. And the society says that men are supposed to be strong. They're not supposed to cry. They're not supposed to, feel feelings. And so that's part of it. But I think when we normalize it and just give them the space to feel what they're feeling and talk about it, generally they'll get on board once they, have one good experience.
Well,
Okay.
kind of an add-on question to that. Do you think that women over verbalize in that sense or no? Be quiet, Julie. Don't even say nothing.
Well, it depends on the topic. I do have some women that it's like trying to crack a nut to get some information out of them. But most women in my experience, are more verbal. But I do also, like if I'm seeing couples, I will challenge the women to allow their husbands the space to share what they want to share. Because if you drug him there and he's there, then you got to give him space to say what he needs to say. So I will, challenge him on that part.
Fair enough. And the reason why I asked this is because I'm 56 years old, and I have just recently started talking to a therapist. Okay. Now, my younger self, 15, 20 years ago, was that man. Mm-hmm. Hell will freeze over. And it did. Now I'm divorced, and most of my kids are grown now. Yeah. And the older I get, the more I realize that would have been the best avenue to walk down. But at that age and time, there was no way that I would do that.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. So it's fascinating to me. The older we get, the wiser we get, and the more we realize, well, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but didn't. Yeah. And I'm okay with that because that's where I'm at.
That's right.
I can't go back. I can only move forward. It makes me a better person today than I would have ever been if I hadn't been through it.
Right. That's right. So. And what I also think to add on to that is if more men shared with other men that it's okay to go to therapy, then they would try it. So I don't think there's enough men saying, hey, you know what, I go to therapy and I'm glad I did. So I think as more men share with other men, then they'll be more on board with it.
I agree with you.
Well, I just want to say that David and I have been friends a really long time, 30 plus years, back when we were wild and crazy. I'm sorry, I was young. David was wild and crazy. I was always the calm, and just so we're clear about that. But I think that as long as you're growing as a person, you do it when you're ready. You didn't do it then, you weren't ready. You're doing it now because you're ready. I probably wouldn't have in my 20s gone to see one either. I do remember, so my mom drugged me to a therapist when I was, I want to say 15 or 16 years old, because she was very concerned about the shoplifting I was doing. So I can admit that now. I used to keep that pretty private. Now, part of it was when I first started shoplifting, it was kind of a dare, and we would go see what we could get away with. And then the real challenge was to get it back. Mm-hmm. And that sounds really stupid right now, but that's what we did. And so one night I got caught. It was at King Soopers, Master Bluffs, and I was stealing Vidal Sassoon shampoo and conditioner, and I had a couple $100 in my purse, but I stole these 2 bottles of conditioner, shampoo and conditioner, and they came out and got me and walked me back into the room, and I was so afraid of what my parents were going to do to me when they found out what I had done, and I was in her car.
Oh no.
And when I was, they were like, we have to call your parents before you can be released. And I was like, please, know. And so they couldn't reach them. They ended up sending me home and saying, you need your parents to come back in. And my mom marched me back. And then after her wanting them to work me for 6 months for free I got the beating of my life. I still feel it. My mom put me till she got tired, tapped out. My dad stepped in and she was like, took her breath and got back in there. I will say one thing, never stole another thing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was corrective.
Mhm.
Now,
Hold on. That's not true. That's not true. You go to garage sales and steal all the time.
no, I negotiate. That's not stealing. We
You
come
go to
to a
garage.
mutually agreed price, dude.
You go to
But
garage sales and steal all the time.
if it's more than $1, I don't care what it is. But truthfully, when I got older, I was thankful for the correction. Because why was I doing that? And in retrospect, the person who kind of started me doing that, I wanted her approval. And I had to work through, well, why did I want her approval? What made her so special? You know, why wasn't my approval or my parents' approval? And now that I have kids that are almost grown, I realize what parents think matters not at all. These random peers, it's what matters. That's their peer group. But I learned, at least before I graduated from high school, peer pressure doesn't work on me. I'm not doing it because my group wants me to. I do it because I want to. In fact, I have a very strong streak of I want to do things and I'm doing whatever I want. I might be out of balance way over on the other side because I'm not real flexible with doing something that I don't want to do or doing it for somebody. I'm like, why would you do it for them? If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. That's just, all there is to it.
Right.
And even conversations with David about stuff, I'm like, why are you doing that for somebody? So I don't know why I went on that diatribe. Anyway, I don't feel that was a trauma. I feel that it was a correction. Do you help people distinguish between actual trauma and maybe it's just the correction?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes. And I think that trauma can be whatever the person feels was traumatic for them, right? Because I think if we line up 10 people who had a similar experience as you, 5 would say it's correction, 5 would say I'm traumatized. And that's why, I'm afraid to say things, or I don't spank my kids or whatever. And so it's really subjective in terms of what a person considers trauma versus what I may see as trauma. Because I may not see that as trauma because I think back in the day, that was the thing to do, right? And we all took it and had to deal with it. And we lived to see another day. But nowadays, you can get CPS called on you or, all kinds of things for doing the same thing that was corrective back in the day. So I think it is subjective. I think it's time appropriate, time sensitive. Like, so back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 90s, that was appropriate. Now, not so much. So I think it depends on the person and what they feel was traumatic.
Okay. Like I said, I feel like the being dunked in the water was traumatic, but the spanking was corrective. And I guess everybody has to work that out. Mm-hmm. One of the questions is it wrong that I feel like I really can't get the full experience of therapy from someone who doesn't look like me, or maybe just not feeling like they can't relate? What's your thoughts on how similar the therapist must be to the patient?
I think that's very important. That was part of the reason why I started my own private practices, because statistically, there were not as many African-American therapists serving Collin County area. And so I wanted to provide that, and which is why in 5.5 years, I've never had to advertise, because people just are looking for me, and I'm thankful for that, right? It's not, I'm trying not to brag about that. I'm very thankful for that, but it's because there is a need. And so I think it's very important. I've heard from some clients that when they have therapists that don't look like them, they just have to explain certain things that you wouldn't necessarily have to if your therapist looks like you. And that's okay. If that is a determining factor for you, I think that's okay.
I think it goes back to, you need to be with someone that you can relate to and feel comfortable with for whatever reason. Because if you don't, I don't think it's going to be effective. That's my take. It's not going to be effective if you're not comfortable with the person.
Right.
It's
Sure.
like, I don't think I would feel as comfortable talking to a man. There's a lot of what happens in my life that I feel is very distinctly tied to being a female in the environment that I'm working in, that I don't think a man would understand. And if I could make him understand, I'm spending so much time making him understand and not working through it. So start with that feels the way I do. Okay. Thank you for that, Cecily. That's a good point. How do people find you? Like, how did they know you were there? Word of mouth?
Yes, and I am on most insurance panels, and so I have gotten a ton of referrals from the insurance companies. And then once, then it's word of mouth. Once the person starts to see me, they'll refer me to their friends, families, or colleagues.
Okay. Do you see married couples together and separately, or do you try to see one? Like, what's your thought about treating married people?
It depends. If ethically, we're in Collin County is a community where you can see, you should see one person or like if you choose to see a person individually, then there's enough people where you can refer the other person to another therapist or refer the couple to another therapist. I've worked in communities that were very small, where there were only a handful of therapists to choose from anyway. And so you ended up having to do it. And even that, I think, is situation specific. If you're able to keep things separate and not share the information that you talk about with the individual, with the couple, I think you might be able to do that. I've done that. But I think also if the couple is extremely toxic with each other, I wouldn't necessarily say, I think it's okay to tag team with another therapist and say, hey, you take this one, I'll take this one. And then, they may need a third person to do the couples counseling because they just have a lot of stuff that prevents them from being effective together. So so sometimes it's more appropriate to separate the couple and not do one person see all of them.
Is that common?
Yes. Yeah. Especially if like, say for instance, the woman likes her therapist, she will then try to bring her husband, for couples counseling or vice versa. And then there's some couples where there's been a lot of mistrust in the relationship. And so they just want a completely neutral third person that doesn't know either of them. And so, we talk about that and I share, like, here are some risks involved in doing all these things. And so, however, once I explain the risks, if they want to move forward, we could do that. But there's only a handful that I will do both. I generally try to refer if I see one individually, I'll generally try to refer the couple out to somebody else.
I'm going to share this with you because this is one of my biggest things before I did the therapy is that I felt like there's an easy route to say, okay, you're at fault, or this happened to you as a child, therefore you're messed up now.
Right.
Okay. I don't buy into that. I think we are who we are because we've been through what we had to go through, good, bad, or indifferent, foul, whatever, the whole nine. So one of the things with therapy that's always bothered me was that, at that point in time, I'm looking for someone to blame And I think that's why a lot of men, and including myself, have always resisted therapy. Whereas now I'm looking for an answer. I'm not looking to place blame.
Right.
I'm looking for an answer. I'm looking for a way to move forward or past without having to go back and say, this is why.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if that helps or helps anybody or anything.
Absolutely. And I think that's okay, right? Because not everybody needs to go back to their past to resolve certain issues, right? So it's okay to say, hey, we're going to start from here and move forward. And I think it's also okay to say that, hey, I don't like this, or, you know, I want to figure out the why. Now, what I try not to tell people, here's what you should do, or here's how this should look, right? I want you to be able to come to that conclusion on your own. So I will ask certain questions that help you think about it in a way that you may not have thought about it before. Because what happens is if you have a therapist who's just always giving advice, well, guess what? When you leave that therapist, you don't know how to resolve issues on your own. You're like, oh, I need somebody to help me, right? And so what I'm going to do is try to help facilitate, you know, ask the questions, say, hey, have you thought about it this way? And make you think about different ways, and hopefully you will come to a conclusion on your own. And I'm just there to facilitate it, but but I don't want to be the one to give it to you, because once you're done with therapy, I want you to have the tools to be able to do it on your own.
Love it.
That makes sense. Have the tools to do it on your own. You know, one of the things I find fascinating is someone's ability to say, I do this so well. They think everybody should be able to do it that well. And then they have little patience with someone who doesn't do it that well. But then when they go into something where someone else is strong, they can't flip that script and say, remember, you're strong here. And so I know I try to make sure I'm being helpful. I try to help people when they have areas that maybe aren't strong where I am. And then, you know, be humble when they're strong. One of the, I guess, breakthroughs, I've had, and then this happened talking to David, the way I learn is very specific. I learn by reading. I don't learn well. I can learn okay, just hands-on, but I learn better by reading and then trying it, rather than trying it without reading first. And listening, not really good for me at all. But there are people who learn by listening much better and retain what has been said much better. And I've been struggling with that, because I'm like, well, this is how I'm telling you to do this, read that, go. And they're like, no. And it took my kids basically, you know, just recently kind of saying, thank you for allowing us to learn in our own way. I didn't push that on my kids, but I, for some reason, push it on everyone else around me. So that's something to work. You don't have to agree, David. I see your face, but you know, I think that feedback from people who care about me and love me is always helpful. But that's something else we can all remember. Accept help from others who are strong in areas where you're not, like a therapist. One thing a therapist has done is seen this many, many, many times. So they can distance themselves from the problem and say, you know, you're not alone. Other people have done this. This is some choices or some guidelines or whatever that can help. Just like those of us who are on here that are realtors, you know, we have lots of experience in the transaction. So when we're helping someone, it's not like, oh my God, this is our one house. Like, we've done this several times. Let us help guide you through this.
That's right.
Do you consider yourself a guide?
Oh, absolutely. I love it. I love to do that.
Yeah. So you're guiding. And I think that if we take that perspective, maybe that removes some of the stigma. It's not that I don't know what I'm doing, but it's like, here's someone that's done this hundreds of times and I've only done it once. How is there stigma in accepting help from someone who is that much more experienced? So I do appreciate your taking the time to share that. I would like to share your information. Let me see if I can find it, because my computer screen looks like someone with ADD. I'm just going to tell you. And I can't even, I know I opened it up. Shamir, if you could maybe share that slide that shows, oh, here it is. There we go. Thank you. So anybody that wants to get in touch with Demetra and build your mental fortress, here is her information. It will also be put in the comments so that you can find it later in the comments on Facebook. And is it okay if I put this in the comments on the YouTube channel as well? Okay. And when we're done, you'll have a link that if you would like to share it with your sphere as well. But I'm just so thankful you came and took the time to explain what therapy is and what you do and how it can help. And even if you don't reach out to Demetra, please reach out to someone that you can be great with. And I just think it's awesome. Shantae has written, excellent topic, therapy is growth. Yes, it is. Accepting help so you can grow where you're not strong is amazing. And I think every single person on here is a person that does that. So it's
what's a PLLC? I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's a professional LLC. So if you have a license in Texas, you should be operating under that. You don't have to, but it's cute. It doesn't necessarily offer a whole bunch of protection, more so, but I think it's more for people who have professional licenses.
Fantastic, thank you. See, we always learn something new.
Well, I already knew that, so you're learning something new, David.
Well, you know, I'm behind the curve, but it's okay. I'm trying to catch up.
No, that's okay. I love. How did you come up with the name? How did you come up with the name A True You? I love that.
You know, I have to be honest and say that I did not put a whole lot of work into it. At the time, I was thinking, you know what, I'm going to work smarter and not harder. So I hired somebody to give me some names, and she gave me a list of names, and I chose, I think it started off with True You or something like that. And I said, oh, I like that. And then she said, well, you know what, because of the algorithm with Google, if you put an A in front of it, it'll keep you at the top. But in addition to that, you know, I do believe that, you know, once you're in therapy, you learn who the true you are, right? Your true self. And so I think that helps a person walk out and say, you know what, now I know who I am, because the world will tell you all the ways that you are and aren't. And
yes.
So this, hopefully when you're done with therapy, you can say, I know who I am now.
You know what? I love that. The world can be extremely harsh, or you know what? Conversely, sometimes it can be too forgiving. You need to find out what your own metal is, what your own attributes are, and embrace them. And I think that counseling is a way. We do have a question. Demetra, can you provide a 15-minute consultation to see if we mesh? You know what? We're going to make sure that her information is in the chat for those of you that want to grab it. Like I said, it will also go in the comments, and maybe contact her about a consultation. I'm not dismissing it. You can answer it. Do you do 15-minute consultations, or what's your minimum cost?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I hope that everybody got something from this, maybe that they didn't expect. And let's first, you know, thank you so much for sharing your time and coming on and talking about this topic, which is really, really crucial. We have a lot of people that need some mental health help. Saw them driving down today. That's another thing. Ever since COVID, people drive like crazy people, like they're entitled to take your spot of the road. So again, thank you very much. Before I close, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask before we just say goodbye?
I don't, but I just want to thank you for coming and sharing with us. I think this has been wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Oh, hold on. There's a few more comments to make sure. Thank you. Sharon says, thank you for your wisdom on Facebook. And then let's see, thank you much for coming. All right. So once again, love it, love it. Thank you. This has been informative. I'll be in touch later. I appreciate your time. As always, I love spending time sharing topics with you. I love the interaction. Thank you guys for joining. I will see you next Thursday.
Bye.
Thank you.